show today. We've got a lot of interviews. Coming up, we'll be talking to the folks about Titanfall, about Batman Arkham Origins, and about Hohokum.
So, Titanfall, Brian, what did you think of it? Looked pretty good.
I think it looks great. It looks a lot like like it took a little bit of like Mech Warrior. It took a little bit of maybe Battlefield. It took a little bit of District 9.
Yeah.
I love the fact that the mechs are fast, that they move around, that they sort of scoop you up and shove you into their belly.
Yeah, I mean, I like that kind of freedom that they have now, that kind of, fantastical sci-fi technology. Like,
right.
You know, you always feel, it seems to me like in a Call of Duty game, you'd always feel a little bit bound to some sort of realism, right? Even though they kind of go a little bit crazy in some of those games.
Right.
But with Titanfall, it looks like they really just are like, okay, now we can do whatever the hell we want. And of course, we're going to do like badass mech action.
What I really want is I want there to be a button you push when your mech's about to blow up. And you push this button, and you jump out, and then your mech runs around the battlefield scooping up enemies, shoving them into its belly, and then it explodes. That'd be cool?
You should pitch that as a feature.
I'm going to pitch it. We're going to get that into
Wireframe, Brian.
Wireframe.
Yeah, I thought it looked really good. I thought it was a really good way to end Microsoft's press conference. It was kind of like, hey, here's the console. It's $499, but look at this beautiful game.
It's got robots that move fast. There was that moment in the gameplay that they were showing where the mech was sort of, I don't know if you remember this, it was looking down into a hole where I guess there were a bunch of soldiers cowering, and it was standing over them and just like emptying its battle rifle. And it was a little terrifying, actually. Because I'm thinking everybody was like, oh, and they were just getting churned into blood butter.
Well, I think that's what's, like the Battlefield series has always had that kind of like crazy moments that people talk about and share.
Right.
And, this seems like that kind of game where you're going to have all these like crazy, like I was about to die and I was being swarmed by all these guys, and then I ejected out of my mech and I landed on the back of this guy's neck. And
yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be going now, I think, to a little video to show what we're talking about, and then we're gonna have Vince Zampella here to talk about the game.
Nice.
The long-awaited debut title from Respawn Entertainment, the studio founded by Jason West and Vince Zampella, former heads of Call of Duty studio Infinity Ward, has been unveiled at E3. It's called Titanfall.
This is our land.
The game will be, for now, exclusive to Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC. The game is a first-person shooter, but it's a departure from the modern military formula that the developers popularized with Call of Duty. Titanfall focuses on fast-paced battles between giant mechs, the titular Titans, and humans. Titanfall on Xbox One will take advantage of the next-gen console's Kinect and Smart Glass integration. It's also going to use Xbox One's cloud-based computing technology. Some of the game's physics and AI calculations have been offloaded to the cloud, Respawn says, features that separate Titanfall on Xbox One from its 360 version. Respawn's game will reportedly feature a one-player mode in addition to multiplayer-focused campaign and competitive modes. And since the competition has spent the past 5 years copying the multiplayer concepts pioneered by the former Call of Duty developers, it's Titanfall's most intriguing aspect. At E3, we're talking to Respawn co-founder Vince Zampella to learn more about Titanfall. We'll also see what he and his team have been up to for the past 3 years, since he and partner Jason West made a very public break with Activision and Infinity Ward.
Here with Vince Zampella, co-founder of Respawn Entertainment. Your baby finally got out, Titanfall. We all got to see it yesterday. Now, is this multiplayer only? Is that correct?
It's a multiplayer-focused game, absolutely.
So what does that mean? I've heard that it's supposed to have some elements of single player. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, what we're doing is taking those cinematic elements out of single player, the signature moments that people love, and putting them into multiplayer to make the world come alive. We're using the Microsoft Cloud to host dedicated servers. All the AI in the game, like all those the guys that you saw running around, there's AI in the game, not bots, not meant to take the place of human players, but AI to fill the game and make it feel alive, make the world feel alive.
So when you say that, does that mean that they will have personality? Like, will they be characters, basically like people you'll come to know, or will they be just basically fodder?
They'll be both.
Okay.
Like if you saw on the dropship,
right?
Sarah opens the hatch for you. She's one of the main characters in the game. They'll pop up on the VDU. They'll give you missions.
Okay, so you see her. She's a recurring character.
Right.
Okay.
Now, what you'll see, like on the field, the guys that you're picking off, those are more of the fodder. They're meant to be there to add, to contextualize. They'll say things. They'll tell you what's going on in the world. They'll salute you because you're the badass.
So why not include a single player campaign?
We wanted to focus on mixing the two, kind of just blending the borders. So this is all those moments, all the good things that we want out of single player are in multiplayer now. So we don't need to. This is the experience, and now you can play with your friends, against your friends, all together, get that experience captured in a much more competitive kind of environment.
So that multiplayer section that we were looking at the Xbox press conference,
right?
How is that set up? Are you basically going into a game lobby to get into that dropship, or how does that work? How are you going to meet up with other players and fight competitively and cooperatively?
Right. You'll go into a lobby, you'll get matched up, or you can party up and join in with your friends, and then you'll get put into the dropship and sent out into the world.
Okay, so it's pretty cut and dry like that. It's not like you're trying to do some like seamless thing.
No, we want it to be easy experience. Get in, you know what you're doing. You party up, or you just decide to play a game. You jump into a game, get in as fast as possible, and you want to be playing. That's the goal. Get everybody playing as fast as possible.
Okay, cool.
So this is relying on some of the cloud technology for the Xbox One, I assume. You guys
That's
are gonna. What elements of that are there? Is there processing happening, or what is it you're doing in terms of using the cloud?
So it's dedicated servers in the cloud.
Okay.
So host advantage gone because now it's dedicated server.
Right.
All that AI on the server, so we don't tax the system, so we can put more kind of into the graphics and into what's going on.
I gotcha. Okay, so you have a little bit of experience with things like hosted servers and dealing with some of those issues. You have a lot of experience with Call of Duty. You left Infinity Ward. Was it 2010? I think is when you guys left.
Left is kind of an odd word, but
well, okay, you got to tell. Okay, how would you put it?
You were not in the building at some point in 2010.
Yeah, we'll go with left.
We'll go with left. Yeah. Okay. So in 2010, was this something that you were envisioning when you departed the company?
No.
I used departed instead of left.
There you go.
What was it? What was in your mind? What sort of game were you thinking of making?
Well, I mean, there wasn't a game in mind when we left. It was. We started up a new company. There was a lot of interest when we left. We started up a new company. We got a team together. We had a lot of guys. This hugely talented team that we put together. We started kicking around ideas, and it took a year to kind of figure out. Everyone very outspoken, very talented, kind of veteran developers. Everyone had this idea of this is the game I want to make. Some of them meshed, some of them overlapped, some of them didn't. So it was this this somewhat painful in ways process of figuring out what's possible, what we can do, what's fun, we want to be grounded, we want to, play to our strengths, but at the same time push the boundaries. So it's honing in on what that experience is. So it's a lot of testing things, let's prototype this, let's see how this works. This is fun, this isn't, and throwing ideas out, getting new ideas. So it really, I would say it took a good year plus to figure out really what we wanted to do.
How did that idea gel though? Was it like Mechs and Humans? Was that kind of the launch pad where you're like, okay, let's go with this?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's about expanding on that gameplay and keeping that gameplay loop. You don't want to do okay, you spawn, you die, you don't really know why. It's like the Titans kind of were born from, A, they're cool, and B, it's that second skin, it's that exoskeleton that lets you, they're super fast, they're not lumbering mechs, they're really fluid, they're fun to play. Your mech gets destroyed, you eject out of it. You play around a little bit, you get a new one, you drop in a new Titan. So that gameplay loop, it feels less, you kind of died because your Titan was destroyed. But you didn't, you escaped, you lived on. So that gameplay loop is much more intriguing and it brings people in. People that aren't necessarily as first-person shooter experience can have a more fun time. But at the same time, it's super competitive.
Was there, when you guys first started, you sat down and first started talking about the game you're going to make, I'm assuming shooter, you guys knew immediately you're going to do some sort of shooter, or was there, at that point, maybe we're not even going to do a shooter?
There was definitely some talk of maybe not even do a shooter.
So what were those ideas? What were the non-shooter ideas?
No, we're not pulling out that file.
Were you going to do gotta
some of those
are
embarrassing, some of those are...
Pokemon spin-off?
Well, now, you guys are, I think, pretty famous for, kind of popularizing the progression system in a first-person shooter context, multiplayer, right? So is that something you're going to continue to do in Titanfall? Is that a big component of the multiplayer
Yeah, we'll definitely have a huge depth to it. You'll be able to upgrade. You'll be able to unlock things as you play. We're not talking about it all yet. This is just the reveal, so we're trying to hold back some.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely, that'll be there.
So do you think that, well, first, you're using Source, is that right?
That's right.
Why did you guys decide to use Source? It's not an engine that you hear a lot of people developing on. Was there a particular thing that drew you to that engine?
It was the ability to rapid prototype. I mean, it was an engine that we could, we knew we were going to replace the renderer and there's all the sound code and all the, so it's heavily modified, but at the same time, what we got, we could give to the designers and say, okay, go, start prototyping stuff. So it got us up and running and doing that like really quickly. And that's important for us.
How did that compare to the development engines that you've used in the past, the environments you've worked in?
That's so long ago, who even remembers?
Is that a good way for me to try to get you to answer that question? So you, real quickly, just let's talk a little bit about that transition when you went to Respawn. You came over with, ultimately, I think 40 people or so joined you. Does that sound about right?
Well, initially it was just Jason and I.
Right.
We formed the company, we opened, we kind of put it out there, hey, we're hiring.
Right.
And we got a lot of resumes. Some were familiar.
What would you say when you guys peaked in development on this game? How many people did you have total?
How many people?
Yeah.
Right now, with test, we're close to 80. 80?
Okay.
So.
And do you have a sense, is that core group mostly made up of people you've worked with in the past?
It's a really good mix of people. So, we've got guys that I've worked with for, 10, 15 years, and there's guys that are, brand new. Some of them are industry veterans, coming from other places. And it's the team has just gelled really well. It's an amazing group of people.
So you guys are on Xbox One and PC, and there's a 360 version coming out.
That's right.
And so, what was the reason for focusing on those consoles and those platforms?
It was a chance. Initially, when we first signed with EA, there was no next gen announced yet. So we were just doing normal platform or the current gen platforms. The opportunity came up to work with Microsoft on kind of defining what this next gen was. All this cloud stuff was really intriguing. It was like, okay, that kind of opens up what we can do here. So we were excited about that. And the ability to work closely with them kind of, instead of them solving for, hey, we have some ideas on what we can do, it's, hey, here's what we want to do in the game. Let's work with them to figure out how we can accomplish that with their back-end stuff. So, because I think this generation really is beyond hardware. It's what you can offer, in addition to all that. So,
So when you look at your game and you think about the people who might play your game, do you think it's going to be attracting the same sort of audience that a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty would attract, or do you feel like it's a different sort of audience?
I think it will. I think there'll be, some overlap, with those groups. I think there'll be some of those people that aren't interested in our game because they're more into, like Battlefield, Call of Duty, that tactical military shooter, and that's, our game's a little different than that. So there'll be people that aren't interested, and I think there'll be people that weren't interested in Call of Duty and Battlefield that are interested in our game. So I think there's kind of hopefully a good mix. We love it. Does that count?
Yeah.
So what, the mechs, do you have an array of mechs, or are you guys talking at all about the sort of different exoskeletons, exosuits you're going to have?
We've only shown one so far.
Are they mechs actually? Can you call them mechs?
No. Mechs are lumbering. Titans are fast.
Titans are fast.
Yeah.
So what, besides the speed, how would you say they differ?
It's just that agility. And the way they control. Like you go, as a pilot, you jump into your Titan, the controls don't change. You can't jump, you can't wall run, obviously, but the way that the feel of the control is the same. And they have like jets that you can dodge as a Titan. Like missiles are coming in, you kind of dodge to the side. So it's a different feel.
Is this something that you think, are you considering or even really thinking about the esports competitive component of the game at all?
It's something that we'd like to talk about. I don't know that we're ready yet until we get the balance of the game right and see what we can do and what it would really entail to do it right, because it's a lot of work to support all that. So it's definitely something we'd love to talk about, and I think we will talk about it with everyone. But
so I'm sure you're aware, Call of Duty, they're still making Call of Duty games. They're still coming out.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Ghosts is taking sort of a different direction. Do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think about that shift that they're doing?
I haven't seen enough to even comment on it. I've got a lot of friends that still work over there. I wish them the best, but I don't know that. I think after the show I'll have to look into all the stuff that I missed because I was backstage or something.
I think the question everybody wants to have answered is, will there be dogs in Titanfall?
We don't have dogs.
No.
We have Titans.
You have Titans. Titans are better than dogs, probably.
I like Titans.
What about used games? I mean, that's been like the talk of the show.
Right.
What's going to happen? It's up to the publishers, it sounds like. What's your take on it? I'm assuming you're familiar with all the debate.
Somewhat. I mean, our game is a multiplayer-focused game, so I don't think it affects us as much. So luckily, I can kind of dodge this a little bit, because it seems to be a radioactive topic. Yeah.
I mean, you say that, but I mean, would you have an issue with your game being resold? I mean, I know it obviously, the always online thing you don't have to worry about because it has to be always online.
Right. Under the right circumstances, no, I wouldn't.
Okay. I just think that, you know, the one thing to think about that with especially a game like Titanfall or Call of Duty is, you know, a lot of kids, I think, trade in a lot of games to buy that thing annually or every other year. Yeah. And I think that's the difficult thing for them, is that, you know, they may only have enough cash to buy 2 or 3 games a year. And I think that's just the kind of thing that kind of maybe hurts, you know, a game like a Call of Duty game or a Titanfall, just because it's an annual franchise. But
makes sense. I mean, as we move towards digital distribution and stuff anyway, it's going to be less and less of an issue. And I don't know, didn't Microsoft say it's up to the publishers?
Right.
So, I mean, there really isn't, no one's actually enacted any policies, right?
Right, not yet.
Okay.
I think everybody's just waiting. They're waiting for the other shoe, the other giant Titan foot to drop. So you must spend a lot of time, I'm assuming you play the game a lot.
Yeah, we do.
How do you think it feels compared to a standard shooter? Do you feel like it's got that, there's like something about shooters, I love shooters, so there's something about them that I just love going back to. Do you feel like it feels exactly like that, or is it satisfying a different sort of itch?
I wouldn't say exactly, but it's because it's different. It feels like, I would almost say, when I play a game that doesn't have like double jump wall run now, I miss it.
Right.
Like I've gotten so used to that feel, and like it gives me that agility to just go anywhere, and that feeling of like a little more freedom, that I miss it in other games now. So to me, I think that means we're doing something right.
How does that wall run aspect of it work? Because that seems like that might be a thing that's a little tough to convey in a first-person perspective.
It's really easy to use. You jump up at a wall and run, and you'll stick to the wall pretty fluidly. Like it's done really well. You'll have
just like until you jump off, or
until you jump off or fall off or stop. Yeah.
Okay.
So you guys, in introducing that mechanic, and then the Titans, you're sort of in some way going in 2 different directions from sort of the standard of shooters. You know, obviously shooters don't have Titans, but also the movement and the fact that, like, my assumption is you're not going to be seeking cover when you're in a Titan. You're just going to be out there. Am I wrong?
I mean, if you're fighting against another Titan, sometimes it's good to like kind of dodge behind things and let some of the
Sears Roebuck building, to the side. We didn't see a lot of the environments. What are they like? Is it sort of destructed cities, or what is it? What are the maps like?
It's kind of a different. I think there's some in the trailer. They showed some of the different environments. Like there is one. The IMC is the military arm that you're up against in the. It's one of the sides that you're in the game. There's their base, which is very, kind of industrial looking, and then there's Fracture, which you saw, which is kind of the demolished city.
Right.
There's a boneyard, which is kind of more deserty. So it's a very varied environment.
Are you guys going to be doing any sort of beta or anything? Beta or anything to do stress tests for your game?
We haven't talked about anything like that yet.
I'm asking you to talk about it.
So since you don't really have, it sounds like a traditional single-player.
Sounds like a good idea, though.
But since there's no real traditional single-player campaign like you would have in some of your past games, how are you going to kind of convey the world and fiction of Titanfall to people?
Some of that, it's just done through context. Like in the game, you see things like, in the city that we showed in the gameplay video, there's like signs up that say, eviction notices and things like that. So people start picking up on that. It's like, okay, this was a city that was built up, but the IMC came in and said, okay, there's minerals under here. It's gas rich. We need to destroy your city because we want those resources. So you'll pick up on that just from the story. There'll be verbal cues as from the NPCs, like the pop-up heads that come in and tell you things. Those are persistent characters. Okay. So the stories kind of drive that. So some of it we're conveying. We're not trying to hit you over the head with it. We want you to have a fun experience, but it's there in the context. And some of the missions, because they are kind of story-driven but vignetted. So it's not like one giant story arc multiplayer game. It's smaller pieces that are easier to digest and less kind of cumbersome for people.
Okay. Now, do you think you are probably going to follow like a traditional, like downloadable content model for the game, or do you have something else in the works for that?
We're not even thinking about that yet.
And this will be something that, in terms of, I know you're not talking about pricing, but do you think it would require, actually with Xbox One, they haven't really talked a lot about this, it's going to require online. Will there be, for both the PlayStation 4, I should have asked you that. Is it coming to the PlayStation 4 down the line? Do you think it might come to another console down the line?
All we're announcing now is Xbox One, 360, and PC.
PC. Yeah. Will there be any interoperability between the?
I don't think so. I don't think that's, I think that the differences in the consoles just create, kind of advantages, and I don't think that's the right thing to do.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Next up, we're going to have Batman Arkham Origins. So hang out and check that game out.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Batman's in the hands of a new developer, Warner Brothers Montreal. They're taking over for Rocksteady Studios for the next entry in the Batman Arkham series. It's called Batman Arkham Origins. Origins is a prequel and takes place about 5 years before the first game in the series, Arkham Asylum. It features a younger, less experienced Batman, but the Dark Knight will somehow manage to have some new, previously unseen tech at his disposal, like the Batwing, which enables fast travel, and a gadget called the Remote Claw. In Origins, Batman will face a rogues gallery of well-worn villains like the Joker and Bane and the Penguin. He'll also confront enemies new to the Arkham series, including Gotham crime lord Black Mask and the assassin Deathstroke, who's also getting his own downloadable content. Batman will also face a new type of common enemy skilled in martial arts, making the rewarding hand-to-hand combat of Arkham games more challenging. Another Batman game will be released alongside Batman Arkham Origins, this one for PlayStation Vita and 3DS. Titled Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate, the game is in development at Armature Studio, the developer founded by former members of Retro Studios, creators of the Metroid Prime series. Warner Brothers has even more planned for Arkham Origins, including an interactive digital comic series based on the company's DC Squared multiverse technology. And how all these Batman experiences tie together, we're about to find out.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. We are joined now by Ben Mattis, who's here to talk about Batman, a little bit of Batman.
Yeah.
Now, you're with WB Games Montreal.
That's right.
Now, that means you're not with Rocksteady. So
That's right.
Explain that. Why are you not with, no, I'm kidding. So how did that happen? How did that happen?
Well, first of all, WB Games Montreal is a studio that's 3 years old. In fact, we just celebrated our third birthday a couple of weeks ago. And when the studio was first created, one of the studio's mandates was to just be very flexible and accept sort of different opportunities within the gaming space. We wanted to see what we could do in the free-to-play space, what we could do in the mobile space. At first, there was even some consideration about social gaming and that kind of thing. But one of the things that became clear, I mean, you know this very well, Montreal is definitely a hotbed of AAA development talent, a lot of whom have quite extensive experience in Unreal. And so as this studio was building its talent, not necessarily to work on AAA Unreal games, we started to look at it and say, wow, there's something here. There is a group here who could do something pretty spectacular, pretty special. And when the opportunity came up to play in the Arkham space, it wasn't a hard sell. We pulled Eric Holmes in, the creative director, who joined us from his time at Epic. Actually, Eric and I knew each other from back when I was at Ubisoft. I had interviewed him at one point in time for a creative director position on a project I was working at Ubisoft. Didn't work out. We stayed in touch, and after his period at Epic, he just one day kind of pinged me and said, hey, so how are things going at Warner? And we're like, wow, I mean, comic book nerd, action adventure guru, open world gaming experience. It was just a match made in heaven. And he had actually worked on the Hulk games with Ames Kirshen, who's the VP for all DC properties at Warner Brothers. So with me knowing Eric and Ames knowing Eric, that was just an obvious fit. He came in, last piece of the puzzle, and the rest, as they say, it's history.
Were you at all, I think that Batman Arkham Asylum in recent history was one of the first games to prove that you could take a comic book and turn it into something that people really want to play.
Yep, totally
it was
agree.
a great game.
Yep.
Did that make you nervous knowing that you were taking on that mantle?
Oh man, I've used this expression before, but totally cognizant and appreciative of and honored in many ways that we are definitely standing on the shoulders of giants, right? Arkham Asylum followed up by Arkham City, what is it, the 12th highest Metacritic reviewed game of all time, sitting pretty at 96.67 or something like that. I mean, it's...
Not that you keep track
No,
of it.
of course not. Yeah, I mean, we are very, very much aware of the expectations. But there's a flip side to that, right? We started this game inheriting everything, all the code, all the assets, all the animation, all the characters of the 12th highest rated game of all time. That's a pretty strong point to start from. And then so launching off of that, diving into that as our foundation, and then adding obviously all the new systems and gameplay and characters and story and all of that cool stuff has allowed us to start from a very, very solid base. So I'm certainly not going to make any claims about our Metacritic's going to be this or that or whatever, but I believe very sincerely we are making an Arkham quality game. When fans get their hands on the game come October 25th, I think all doubts will disappear, and they will recognize that we deserve this opportunity, and hopefully we've made a game that stands on its own 2 feet, that's worthy of the Arkham, the Arkham moniker.
So why a prequel? Why go back to sort of his origins?
Sure. Well, that's a great question as well. One of the things that was really important for us was to tell our story, to make our game. We're not Rocksteady West. We're not a subsidiary. We have different ideas, different visions. We have our own stories that we want to tell and our own systems that we want to implement and our own sort of take on some familiar faces that we wanted to bring to the table. If we had tried to do a sequel, for example, to Arkham City, we would have been beholden to everything that they had, all the story that they had just told, their takes on the characters, their vision for exactly how that world looked. By going to a prequel, we've given ourselves what we call some sort of creative headroom, an opportunity to say, okay, 5 years before Arkham Asylum started, this is what Batman looked like. This is what the Joker looked like and acted like. This is what Bane looks like and acts like. And we have that opportunity to tell the story of their arc, their growth, to become the characters that we know them to be in Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. That arc, starting here and bringing those characters to there, is a huge opportunity because it means that we can show growth, we can show change. If we start them from the position of Arkham City, that's very well established, right? We like to say sort of Batman's kind of part of the establishment by Arkham City. Hey Batman, my cat's caught up in the tree. Hey Batman, can you come and help me? Yeah, no problem, Cop X. I'm going to jump up into that tree and help you get your bat. Yeah, right, way to go. That's not the story that we wanted to tell. We wanted to tell the story of the Batman who was still scary, who the thugs, the few thugs who had encountered him wouldn't talk about him, right? He's like an urban myth. He's like a legend. The cops don't think he exists. If you go to a cop station, you see signs of Dracula and vampires in different shapes because they have no idea who he is. He's still very much in the shadows, and when he appears, he doesn't open the door and say, put him up. He sets the explosive charge on the wall, blows the door down, steps through, backlit, smoke everywhere, eyes glowing, and the thugs, wet themselves. So that's the story we wanted to tell.
And you have gadgets.
Yeah,
Batman
sure.
has gadgets.
Yeah.
How do you sort of, you have an origin tale, but you also have some fancy gadgets.
Sure,
Why not have like dynamite or...
Definitely, that's a really important question. Look, at the end of the day, gameplay first, right? And I don't think anyone could discourage us from that decision. It's absolutely fundamentally important to us that we create a game that feels familiar in terms of the control mechanics and the experiences that you expect, having been a fan of the Arkham franchise, and yet obviously introduce new gadgets, new mechanics, new enemies, all of that new sort of stuff, and then narratively explain how these might be prototype gadgets, or these might be gadgets that he's discovered and uses but isn't necessarily taking on some of his latter adventures. We even narratively have some of that in our own game where you will seek out opportunities to return to your stock, return to your sort of your outfitting area, where you will pick up different gadgets that you'll use as your understanding of the challenges that you're facing increases. And I mean, it's I think well established within the canon that Batman doesn't always necessarily carry every Bat gadget with him, right? He goes back, he outfits according to the particular challenge that he's going to face. So we feel that we've made exactly the right choice in terms of ensuring that those powerful, empowering Bat gadgets are part of the experience, that people have access to that, but also that we've narratively explained and justified why, for example, some of the gadgets that we've chosen to introduce in this game aren't necessarily there in Arkham Asylum.
They've outlawed bat wings 5 years
exactly.
after the...
It's like, you know what?
Okay.
The no-fly zone. Man, I'm going to shoot that thing out of the sky if you fly it through.
Well, so you talked about about Batman outfitting himself with those gadgets. Is that something that you're actually going to do in-game, or are you talking about just like in terms of the setting for this particular game? Are we going to go to the Batcave?
Maybe. We have taken very seriously the sort of iconic elements of the Batman fantasy. Certainly the Batwing is one example of that. The relationship with Alfred, this relationship with Gordon, those are things we're taking very, very seriously. I don't want to talk too much about the key locations that you visit, but for sure we are very cognizant that there are certain locations that people expect to visit, and in certain instances we're definitely giving them that opportunity.
So now you have obviously the game you guys are working on, but there's also Blackgate, which is Vita and 3DS?
3DS, yeah.
How is that going to fit into your game?
Oh, great. That's an excellent question. So we are obviously a prequel to Arkham Asylum. They are a sequel to our game. So the combined experience of Batman Arkham Origins and Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate tells the holistic story of this first chapter. Obviously, they both stand on their own 2 feet. You don't have to have played the console version in order to understand and appreciate the handheld, and vice versa. But for those who do choose to buy and play both of them, you'll get a story that extends a few months after the events of Arkham Origins, where some of the familiar faces from our story return, obviously in the setting of Blackgate, and it's also an opportunity for them to introduce a couple of characters who are seeded later on in the franchise, but who didn't necessarily thread into our exact story. So it's a great continuation of that narrative.
Is there an actual link? Okay, maybe not narrative link, but like any kind of technical or gameplay link between Arkham Origins and the Arkham Origins DC Squared multiverse interactive comic? Did those two things tie together in any real substantial way? They
definitely tie in narratively. That's a given. There is talks that are underway right now to see whether or not there's an opportunity to do something a little bit deeper than that. No guarantees, no promises yet. It's definitely on the radar to see if we can put some interesting hooks in there, but we'll see if we can get it done in time, really.
Okay.
That's really what it boils down to.
And real quick, I know that the Adam West downloadable Batman outfit is available. Adam West downloadable voice pack, is that possible?
So first, and sound effects.
Yes.
Kapow, boom.
Yes.
So just make sure it's clear that that's a Sony exclusive. Yep. That was announced at the Sony conference. It's a skin. And so the skin is the aesthetic change on the character, but Roger Craig Smith is our Batman.
Okay.
Oh, wow. That's
fair enough.
Yeah, that's. So do you communicate at all with DC?
Oh, very much. Yeah.
What sort of have you gotten any specific direction? And actually, I was curious: is any of this going to look at any of the Silver Age stuff, the old comics, or is this all sort of your take on his origin?
It's our take. I mean, we've often said that the comic book series that has been the most sort of inspirational to us is the series known as The Legends of the Dark Knight. So the Legends of the Dark Knight series came out in 88, 89, something like that, and it was a premium book that basically reset the timeline and sort of said, okay, let's start over the continuity back from effectively, a little bit after year one, and so that every time Batman encounters the Joker, every time the Joker escapes from Arkham Asylum, it's the first time within that continuity that has happened, allowing those storytellers to recreate certain key iconic events, key iconic meetings, key iconic story elements with a new take, a new angle. And that was hugely inspirational for us because that's exactly what we want to do in our game. It's no secret now that the Joker is in our game. He has a role in our game. I was chatting earlier with the voice actor, Troy Baker, who just does a fantastic job. We couldn't be happier with his performance. And while our game is not an origin story for either of those two characters, there's definitely an opportunity to play with the origin of that relationship and play with some of those little subtleties and some interesting angles there. And so the Legends of the Dark Knight sort of was the reference for how that's done, but we are not basing our story off of any comic. This is our story created 100% with the support and the involvement and the oversight of chief creatives at DC, like Jeff Johns, who's just an absolutely wonderful partner on this project.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, Ben. We really appreciate it. Stick around. Next up, we're going to have some people or some person from Hohokum, not some people. Just
well, thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a great day.
If you like colorful, charming, and really hard to describe video games, you might want to pay attention to Hohokum. This cross-gen, cross-platform game is coming to PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation Vita from developer Honeyslug. They promise ample whimsy and an emphasis on playful exploration and creativity. We think Hohokum creator and artist Richard Hogg sums up the game best when he said, "You play as a curious, flying, snake-like character that's kind of a technicolor, calligraphic, worm-like, kite-like being that is very expressive and kinetic and kind of mesmerizing to play." To be a little more clear, Hohokum is described by its creators as a playground filled with goals and secrets to discover. But its creators say it's free of the usual pressures of video games, constantly being told to do things, fearing failure, and being challenged to earn progress. Whatever Hohokum is, it's intriguing. It's also getting some support from Sony Santa Monica Studios and has made appearances at Indiecade and the Independent Games Festival.
Welcome back. We have with us Ricky Hagget from Honeyslug.
Hello.
Who is someone involved with Hohokum. A really cool game. I was just checking it out earlier today. It's coming to the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita, correct?
And PlayStation 3.
Oh, and PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
It's so weird, but in a good way. Like, I really, really liked it.
It's fun to try and describe it.
It is. It's, I think the thing, correct me if I'm wrong, the thing that I liked about it, don't correct what I liked about it, correct if my premise is right. It felt like there's no way to fail in this game, right?
No failure.
So basically, there's success and there's exploration.
Yeah. The player has a lot of freedom. The player isn't being told very explicitly what to do. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can interact with in the environment and things to play with. But you can't really die or fail. You just kind of explore and find out what happens when you fly past things or when you bump into things. One of the core sort of guiding principles behind the game is that it should feel fun intrinsically just to be in this space and fly around. Like, what you are in Hohokum is like a long ribbon, like a flying kite. And the idea is that the sense of doodling and expressing shapes and just kind of making nice patterns should just feel like a really nice thing to do anyway. And then by doing that, you kind of gradually find out what happens in these worlds and head towards a goal, but not in a very directed way. We never really want to tell the player, right, okay, here's what you have to do. We really want to kind of step back and let people just have space to just enjoy being in this kind of playground.
But you do provide a lot of clues about things where it's like you do get a lot of feedback where it's like, okay, I feel like I'm doing something good or like I'm doing the right thing. I feel like I'm about to unlock some.
Yeah, we're trying to make with kind of physics and like lots of hand-drawn animation and audio and music. We're really trying to make a kind of tactile experience that does provide a lot of feedback and sort of helps to steer the player, but never in a way that, we never really want to say, hey, well done, you did the right thing. Now, whereas we're really trying to let it be quite open and not be too demanding about what you should be doing at any one time.
Well, I think maybe we should actually go back just a little bit, because I tried to describe the game in a video we just rolled, but I was really just using Richard Hogg's language. Like, he described it, I think, on the PlayStation blog.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the kind of thing where a lot of people would be like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So can you do your best to
Yep.
describe Hohokum?
Okay, so from a purely mechanical point of view, you control a creature which is like a long, colourful streamer, and you can move it around. And there's kind of gravity, but you can easily go wherever you want. And and you leave behind you a long trail, and characters can ride on that trail, and you can wrap that around things, and you can fly past things and bump into things which have interactions attached to them. And in different worlds, different stuff happens. So some places are very figurative. There are little villages where you can kind of get people to come out of their houses and ride around on you, and then you can get them to pick stuff up and then take that stuff to places, and then they'll jump off and do something with those things that they've been carrying, without going into the specifics, right? And then there are other places which are way more abstract and way sort of simpler in a way, where it's much more about just making nice wavy lines or lighting up things in a circle. More kind of primal, abstract kind of gameplay.
You mentioned primal. Where does the name come from?
Hohokum is a misspelling of an ancient civilization that collapsed around Arizona. There's a whole ton of like archaeological work being done in that area. It's like an ancient collapsed civilization. And I guess there's not direct parallel, but there's definitely a sense about Hohokum, which is like we're trying to make a sort of we're trying to tap into anthropology and history and make a place that feels like a real place. Like we don't really have an arbitrary ice world, or you know, we're really trying to kind of paint a world that feels like there's stuff going on below the surface. So in our E3 demo, we have this kind of village of guys who they have this ritual of flying kites. And they live in a very specific sort of place, and the intention is, without kind of being explicit about it, you want people to sort of get under the skin of this place and start to think about what it's like to live there and why are these people doing this stuff. And yeah, there are other places in the game which feel very different to that, but which are trying to tap into other things in history. So yeah,
you look at the game, you play the game, and I don't think the first thought you have is this is a game about a primal history set in Arizona. No. So how did those two? How did that happen?
We started making the game and in quite an abstract way. The first things in the game were abstract, and gradually we headed along the road of becoming more figurative and having real places and buildings and people. Right. And we didn't want to just have kind of generic, cute characters doing arbitrary, whimsical things, although there's a lot of whimsy in the game. Dick and I, when we were kind of, we had a pre-production phase when we signed the game to Studio Santa Monica, where we spent a lot of time going around the museums in London. London has loads of amazing free museums. So we went to the National Maritime Museum, where they had an amazing exhibition about festivals that take place on the River Thames. And we went to the Natural History Museum and looked at all the different things that Britain has stolen from around the world and put into this huge, amazing building. And the Imperial War Museum, and just kind of walking around looking at all this stuff and just thinking about, well, yeah, there are interesting things that have happened in the world that we can take and repurpose and sort of, not that you would know explicitly, but like, yeah, we have like ancient Egyptian tombs, and we have like real bustling city, cosmopolitan places as well, and this attempt to create places which don't feel arbitrary, I guess.
Now, I understand you have some kind of deal with Ghostly International, like the record label. Yeah. And so some of the music in the game, is it just purely licensed tracks, or is it?
They'll be original stuff as
really?
Well. Yeah.
Okay.
We made a playlist of like our ideal dream music to have in Hohokum. And like the kind of stuff that it was like a Spotify playlist of like maybe like 30 or 40 tracks, and it had a bunch of Ghostly artists on it. And we were chatting to the guys at Santa Monica, and they were like, well, we know the record label boss of Ghostly. Why don't we talk to them and see if we can make something happen? And we were like, yeah, this is amazing. And yeah, so it's a mixture. It's some licensed tracks in the back catalogue and some original compositions as well.
Original compositions from who?
Not saying yet, but we'll be saying soon.
But these are like pretty standard tracks. This is not dynamically.
No. The music is split up into a bunch of layers, and then we do interesting things with those layers. So, for example, in the E3 demo, there's a track which, as you light up these lamps, it brings in different layers of the music. So one kind of big platform of lamps is kind of analogous to the drums, and one is analogous to the string section. And you can like turn these lights on and off to sort of provide a mix to the music.
Okay.
In the tidal place, with the place with the water, when you go out of the water, it drops out layers of the music, and when you go back in, it brings them back in. Yeah. So yeah, there's a ton of interesting dynamic music that we're doing. At the moment, it's at that kind of level of complexity, but there are other places that we're planning where the place is very much about authoring music. So there are some places that we'll show in the future which is much more about the player just effectively playing a musical instrument.
Right.
Well, there's like kind of like partial musical instruments scattered around level. Yeah, it's complementary.
The audio design, again, there's a guy called Daniel at Santa Monica who's doing the audio design. The audio design and the music are very, very closely related.
Okay.
And there's a real attempt that just flying around and interacting with things kind of adds to the soundtrack of the place. It's really important that those things mesh together really, really successfully.
Would you say if you had to choose, which is more important, the audio or the visual then of this game?
I think that the way into the game is definitely the visuals. Like I think the first thing that you kind of come across, that they're very impactful, like the art and we have loads of hand-drawn animation. But I think that over the course of time, I really like the idea that people will be experiencing the soundtrack that we've put together through the medium of this game. Like I love the idea that once you've played this game enough to have been to all the places, that you would want to go to a place just to listen to music. And also that like it's the kind of game that you could imagine one person playing in a living room with a bunch of other people, and effectively those people are all just sitting around hanging out, listening to some cool music. One person happens to be controlling the game. Yeah. The controller could get passed around, and it doesn't really matter. It just becomes a way to listen to a load of lovely music. Maybe.
It's funny because in describing it, and even when we've described it, we haven't really talked about what you do, because it's so exploratory. But also the levels. Would you call them levels? What would you refer to them as?
I like to refer to them as places.
Places.
They're
very different.
Levels is fine.
Like the things you're meant to do there are in no way associated. They're not connected. It's not like you're doing the same thing in every.
Correct.
How many places do you have in the game?
We're aiming for around 15, 16, kind of like very distinct places. It's still an open question how we join those places together. Like to what extent we take all these places and sort of butt them up against one another, or whether there are places which feel more like a kind of transitional zone between these things, so that we really want to make this place feel well-rounded and kind of as believable as it can do. So that the world has a coherence to it. So we're still trying to figure out exactly how to spread this stuff out, and how much extra stuff to add in between the sections. There's a lot. One of the things is that, so for example, in the Kite Village place, where the people fly kites, there's a bunch of interactable things which aren't really central to the goal of that place. And you can almost imagine that you could extract them and make a place which is very much focused on one particular type of thing. And there are these things called the pop nuts. They're like little, almost like bumpers. They change size and they bounce you off, and you can bump through lots of them. And in Kite Village, that's a kind of self-contained thing. It's like a tree growing out of a tortoise, and you can bump into all of these bumpers. And if you do that, something will happen. But elsewhere in the game, there's a giant forest of just these things, where you can just get lost, just bumping around for ages, just lost in this maze of these pop nuts, which has a very different feel to it. Even though it's a kind of an element that sort of repeats, but it's kind of taken into a different context.
Is there any difference between the Vita, PS3, and PS4 versions of the game?
So Vita, we're going to use the touchscreen a bunch.
Okay.
Like you'll be able to touch stuff. The nice thing about Hohokum is because it has no like score, or there's no measure of how well you did a thing. It doesn't really matter that much whether we let the player touch stuff or fly. It's not like the player can cheat in any meaningful way in Hohokum. So there's lots of opportunities to have touch and gesture built into the interaction. PS4, we've got some really exciting ideas for the touchpad that we're not ready to talk about yet. But yeah, we definitely we've got some cool stuff that you can do with that thing.
Have you found that touchpad useful then? Because I don't think we've really seen at this point a lot of games that are actively using it.
Yeah, we've got a funny idea. I think I'm excited about. It's something that I'm not quite ready to talk about because it's going to take a bunch of work to tune it to the point where this is now a thing we can show to people and we're really happy with. So,
okay.
But yeah, I think there are possibilities for lots of games with the touchpad. But
all right, well, thank you so much, Ricky, for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're going to be. We'll be back tomorrow with High Poly at 8 a.m. and Wireframe at 3 p.m. Pacific.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.